Okay, class, so Spain builds an American empire. This is chapter 20, section 1, and this is our final chapter of the year, okay, or of this term. So, it all starts with a man named Columbus. Now, you probably heard of Christopher Columbus before, okay? Christopher Columbus is not Portuguese. So we've talked about how the Portuguese, they start the age of exploration with people like Vasco da Gama, okay, and Bartholomew Diaz. Christopher Columbus, on the other hand, is sailing for Spain. So what ends up happening is while Christopher Columbus is sailing, he is trying to reach India. So he's basically trying to find the same route that Vasco da Gama was finding on his way to India. But in 1942, he thinks that he's reached India. And he comes onto a small island in the Caribbean, and he says to the natives there, Los Indios, which means Indians, okay? But where he actually is he has landed in the New World, which we know today as North and South America, okay? So Christopher Columbus, he is the first person to find the New World of the Americas. Now, remember, so he thinks that he is in India, and that is why he calls the native people there Indians, okay? Los Indianos. What is important to note is that he probably landed on what is today known as the Bahamas, okay? So the Bahamas, they are a small island in the Caribbean. That is where we think Columbus is the first landed. So the voyages of Columbus. So as we can see here, we have Columbus is leaving from Cadiz in Spain. He's making his way across the Atlantic Ocean, and he's landing up in the Bahamas area that we know today, okay? When he gets there, he's a little disappointed because the reason why Columbus is going on this voyage is for gold, okay? But what he ends up doing is he ends up claiming land for Spain. So just picture this, Spain is the first country to start taking land in North America and South America, okay? In 1943, he goes to the Americas, again with an even larger fleet of ships and more men. And what he's trying to do is he's going to set up colonies. So he wants Spain to basically start moving people over to these islands and start having another foreign-controlled nation. So this is what a colony would be, okay? After this happens, we have tons of explorers decide to go to the New World. So we have tons of explorers basically trying to go and claim land for their country. So as you can see here, we have Portugal are the green arrows, Spain the red, France purple, England orange. So if we were to look, Spain, there's Columbus in the red. They sort of colonize here. We have some people from England, Drake and Cabot colonizing and traveling all around South America, all the way to China. We have Magellan. These are all famous explorers. We're not going to focus too much on them, okay? But it's important to know that we have Alvarez for Portugal. We have Eremigo Vespucci for looks at South America. We have the German map maker. We have Núñez del Boa, Ferdinand Magellan. All of these people are now exploring the New World in other parts of the world. The Spanish conquest in Mexico. So now what happens is we already have people starting to settle in what we know today as Mexico and Barbados. So the Spanish in particular, they're the ones who start to colonize the New World. And what we would call these people who start to colonize are conquistadors, okay? Now this is Hernan Cortés. Hernan Cortés, he is a conquistador who in 1519, that's about 30 years after Columbus discovers the New World, he actually lands in Mexico, okay? So they have already sort of colonized a few of the islands like Bahamas, Hispaniola. Now they're starting to turn their attention to the larger mainland of Mexico. So as we see, we have people who colonize or conquer are known as conquistadors, okay? So what he's doing is he's going on to Mexico. Now, Mexico is not empty. There are people living there. Now, these people are known as the Aztecs. So this picture below, this is Tenochtitlan. Tenochtitlan is the place where Aztecs are living. It's a complete city. So when Hernando Cortez, when he goes to Mexico, he's not sort of claiming land that's empty. He's claiming land that there are people living there who have built complete cities, okay? So what ends up happening is Cortez and 600 men, they reach the Aztec capital. That was Tenochtitlan, and that still exists today. You could still visit Tenochtitlan. Of course, no one lives there. And by 1521, that's about 2 years later, they're able to conquer a whole empire. Now, if you were to think of an empire, we're thinking of millions of people. Cortez only had 600 men. How is he able to defeat this whole empire? The reason why Cortez is able to sort of take over this whole continent is because they have superior weapons, okay? So Cortez, if you think he has 600 men, and those men are all carrying guns. Well, the Aztec people, they had never seen guns. Aztec people are still using things like bows and arrows. So of course, a gun which is able to kill people a lot quicker than a bow and an arrow. The other thing that Cortez does is there are many other Native American groups in this area who hated the Aztec Empire. The Aztec Empire had taken them over. So many other Native Americans, they actually align themselves with Cortez. So we have Native Americans are fighting with Cortez and his 600 men to sort of take down the Aztec Empire. So there's intertribal warfare. The last reason why Cortez was able to easily take over this empire was because of disease. Many of these Native Americans, they had never been exposed to the types of diseases that Europeans were exposed to. And it ends up wiping out millions of Aztecs, okay? So those are 3 reasons: weapons, Native American allies, and disease. Now Cortez is doing this in Mexico. We have another man doing this in Peru, okay? His name is Francisco Pizarro. So Francisco Pizarro is also a conquistador, and he is leading an army into Peru. And now in Peru, they don't have the Aztec people, they have the Inca people. That is another native group. So again, we have Pizarro. He kills Andalupa, who is the Incan ruler, and he is able to defeat the Incans, much the same way that Cortez defeats the Aztecs, okay? So this is in 1532. So Spain's pattern of conquest. Now, Spanish men who are conquering these areas, many of them end up marrying Native American women, okay? And when these Native American women and Spanish men have children, we call them mestizo. Mestizo means a mix of Spanish blood and Native American blood, okay? So what happens to both Mexico and to Peru are that many of these populations have mestizo population. Now when we think of the Spanish and their rule in the New World over the Native Americans, we think of it as a horrible system, okay? The Spanish end up coming up with a system called the encomienda. The encomienda system is where the Spanish are forcing Native Americans to work for them. It is depicted in this picture right here. As you can see, we have the tall, white Spanish man beating the Native American woman. And you can see the Native Americans working in the background. This was a horrible system. They did not treat Native Americans with respect. Many Spanish, because they believed they had God on their side, the Christian God, they believed that made them better than Native American peoples. The Portuguese in Brazil. Again, I'm not going to focus too much on the Portuguese, but what you should know is that while Spain is being colonized in Peru and Mexico, we have Portuguese, they're starting to settle in what is today called Brazil. And there, the Portuguese are doing the same thing that the Spanish are doing. So, we have the conquest of the Aztecs versus the conquest of the Incas. This is your question of the week. I would like you to compare these two conquests. Please compare what the differences of each conquest and the similarities in the middle. I'm going to check this in your notes. Ultimately, what all these colonies do is that we have Spain is becoming a very rich country. The reason why Spain becomes rich is because all of a sudden they have all these colonies which they produce crops. And now those crops bring in wealth to Spain. Okay? Spain also is able to enlarge its navy. So the more money that Spain brings in from these new colonies, the more they are able to expand their navy and the more they are able to explore. Okay? These navy, they're also able to carry a lot of treasure back to Spain. So remember, when we started the age of exploration, we were looking at money, land, and glory for one's country, as well as Christianity. Well, Spain is doing all four of these things. Okay? Conquistadors push north. So all of a sudden, Spain is there, and their growing power and their growing sort of money is able for Spain to push even more north. So we have more people exploring North America. So just to be clear, we settle South America first, then North America. So we have Ponce de Leon. He makes claims in Florida, which is part of the U.S. today. We also have Coronado, explores the Southwest. He finds some gold over there, 1540s. We also have many Catholic priests are starting to move around the Southwest and set up missions. Okay, these Catholic priests, these are probably our Jesuits that we've talked about during the Reformation. And the last thing we already have, by the 1600s, the Spanish, they claim a capital as Santa Fe, which is in New Mexico today. It is still called Santa Fe as well. What ends up happening is we have, of course, some opposition to the Spanish. Now, I said the Spanish, they were not very kind when they ruled against the natives. If we were to look down here, we have a Spanish man, and he is actually pulling the hair of a native person. And it almost looks like this native person is gushing blood. This is a type of mistreatment that Spanish were doing to the Native Americans. Okay? Someone sort of spoke out against this. So many Catholic priests, because they were Christian and they believed it was wrong to treat people this way, they spoke out against how Spanish conquistadors were treating them. Okay? What ends up happening is we have Bartholomew de las Casas. He ends up sort of discussing what should happen instead of mistreating Native Americans. So remember, the Spanish are forcing Native Americans to work for them for little to no pay. They were their slaves. What ends up happening is after de Casas sort of speaks out against this, they get a new form of slavery. They're no longer going to force natives. So they actually abolish this encomenda system, which is forcing natives. And now they're going to export Africans to be workers. So now all of a sudden we have Africans from Africa being taken over to North America, and that is going to be the slave labor that the Spanish use. Okay? Now some Native Americans end up resisting the Spanish conquerors. Okay? In fact, one man whose name is Pope, not Pope, he actually leads a rebellion against them. But the Spanish, they are driven out to stay. So it's important for us to sort of note that this is sort of a new sort of trade that's happening. between Africa, Europe, and the New World.